When we talk about the start of the Second World War, many think about Germany fighting Poland in September 1939. And that's true. But when does a regular war become a world war? After Poland fell, things seemed like a usual fight between Britain, France, and Germany. The fundamental shift from a typical war to a world war happened in April 1940 during the invasion of Norway. Today we are diving into a big question. Did Winston Churchill kick off World War II? Get ready for a wild ride as we explore the twists and turns of history. Stick around, it's about to get interesting. Between the start of the war on September 1, 1939 and the invasion of Norway in early April of the following year, neither sided littlets. The memories of the First World War were still fresh, and many didn't want to see millions of Europeans killed again without much reason. Poland, where the war began, had already been defeated, and Prime Minister Chamberlain was thinking about making peace with Germany. Even Hitler wanted peace, and he sent offers to Britain. If Britain had accepted, history might have turned out very differently. One man with other ideas was the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill. Regarded by both Parliament and the King alike as an unstable warmonger, he was doing his best to live up to the name. Germany relied heavily on iron ore from Sweden and Norway for their war effort. Winston suggested that Britain breach Norway neutrality within 3 weeks of hostilities breaking out. Near Norway, there is a path between the islands called the Leads. In World War I, the British couldn't completely block it because of this. It was in September 1918 that the Norwegians agreed to let them put mines there. But Germany was already losing by then. Churchill wanted to break Norway's neutrality, whether they decided or not. I immediately told the cabinet we should stop the Norwegian ships carrying Swedish off from Narvik. I suggested putting mines across the 3-mile limit. For several weeks, he kept saying not only we should put mines, but we should also take control of the north of Norway and even northern Sweden. In December, he dismissed criticism with a quote, "Small nations must not tie our hands when we are fighting for their rights and freedom." When the Winter War started, Churchill saw his chance and convinced many to support his plan to get involved in Scandinavia. Now they had the excuse to do it. At first, the plan wasn't to invade for the iron ore. They just wanted to step in as the good guys stopping communism. Admiral Orton, a Frenchman helping plan these operations, honestly admitted this. No one hoped to stop the Soviet army and save Finland. The idea was to use the pretext of such an operation to lay hands on Swedish iron ore and deny it to the Germans. Fear of communism was running high, especially in Sweden, and May thought that once Stalin inevitably destroyed Finland, he would come right across the Swedish border and beyond in search of warm water ports, which the Soviets desperately needed. However shaky Churchill's pretext sounded, it may have worked at the time. The Allies tried their hand. Chamberlain could take the pressure no more from choosing coming around to Churchill's idea. On the 22nd of December, the Foreign Office sent the Scandinavian government a communication telling them that the Allies proposed to stop the iron ore supply. At this time, Stockholm was Europe's spy capital, so the message almost immediately fell into German hands. They may have just phoned Hitler and told him the plans themselves. Chief of the General Staff Edmund Ironside wrote in his diary on the 2nd of January, "A long day, actually 8.5 hours in conferences and meetings. You cannot make a war like that. The cabinet meeting to consider the Scandinavian issue became a debating morning. Winston was all out to start immediately without thinking about the consequences. I think the main argument against this project of Churchill's is that I think it will accelerate any contemplated German action in Scandinavia. We are not ready for this till the middle of the match. The man who had roused the Brits into the Gallipoli disaster in World War I was now clearly at it again. At this time in the war, he didn't get his way immediately, as everyone saw him for what he was. He was kept around as he was always enthusiastic and ready to get in there. No one doubted his drive of work ethic. But he lived up to his name as a bully dog and was a loose cannon. It was becoming evident that Churchill would get his way. The Norwegian King Haakon pleaded to his nephew King George VI of England, begging him to use his influence to stop the plan. Historically, the Norwegians preferred the British liberal country and significant trading partners. He couldn't understand why the Brits were being so belligerent toward his nation, which had done nothing but want to stay out of the war like they had in the Great War. Around this time in mid-January, Churchill was urging immediate action. By now the whole world knew what the Brits were up to. This was in Germany, where one man made decisions with the input of his closest advisors. This was parliamentary Britain, and people talked. Things were a total mess, and Hitler took his information and made his continuous plans ready to prim the Brits. If they followed through, the fact that Germany now had a contingency plan was obvious. Halifax suggested then they wait until Germany acted first so they could escape the odium of being the first to take such a step. The temperature continued to rise, and on the 19th of February, King Gustav of Sweden publicly reaffirmed his nation's neutrality. He said it was the nation's duty to stay out of the war between the great powers, and it was now an open secret that the British were coming. The Swedish press openly discussed it daily. Everyone knew what was coming, not when. Then Britain's cover was abruptly gone due to mounting international pressure. Stalin negotiated a somewhat reasonable peace with Finland, and the Winter War ended. There was no longer the pretext needed to invade. But now they were too deep. Things were already in motion, and the men were already at the port, ready to embark and begin the plan at a moment's notice. Over in Germany, things were the same. Hitler was ready to act as soon as he knew the British would, and the men were at their staging areas just inland from significant ports like Kiel on the Baltic coasts, ready to overrun Denmark and Norway much faster than the Brits could dream of doing given their proximity. Chamberlain, expanding the whole operation so as not to avoid poking Germany into invading first, was supported by his usual crowd. But as always, he was opposed by Churchill. All had now fallen to the ground because of so cumbersome process that they were too late. Whether the Germans had some plan of their own which would open upon us, I cannot tell. It would seem astonishing if they had not, said Churchill. By late March, Churchill had caused such a stir that a vote of no confidence was appearing, likely soon to oust Chamberlain. Eventually, he gave way and implemented the plan on April 5th. On the 2nd of September 1939, Hitler declared that Norwegian neutrality was inviolable. However, events had changed dramatically, and he knew full well what the British were up to. Now it was time to move. The British began laying the mines in the Norway forts, and the government protested vigorously when the king was awakened on the morning of the 9th of April and told that Norway was at war. He rightly asked, with whom? It indeed was a confusing situation for poor Norway. The British set off to get there, doing it the Churchill way. After all, to him, this was just a way to, quote, open up the war. The Germans, however, had amassed the realistic number of aircraft, boats, and men needed to complete the objective. Both sides set off at about the same time, but there would only be one winner. As the German invasion fleet set off for the Norwegian ports, Denmark lasted just hours, and Norway fell in 2 months. The importance of Scandinavia for the iron ore was immense, and Hitler had scored a significant victory. But in the long run, Churchill got what he wanted. He had opened the war just as he wished, and now the fate was sealed. He had made Hitler seem like a conqueror on the world stage. Despite this being his plan, he had thrown Chamberlain under the bus for the failure of his idea that he had pushed him into, and he became Prime Minister himself. No one else was willing to take command, and it would always be Winston. But Britain was now in the hands of a madman. Now all he had to do was wait. He was well aware that Americans would eventually join the war, and with them involved, it was only a matter of time. Churchill was on the payroll to keep the fight going by shadowy groups in the city of London, and there was never any question of surrender. As long as he could keep the British people's morale up, Churchill's Norway division turned the Second World War into an actual world war. His plan of opening up the war ended up costing millions of soldiers and innocent civilians alike their lives in an increasingly confusing war. Many, especially the Americans later on, were not sure what they were fighting for. Considering the Allies' own in the end, if you feel his plan was worth it, that's your prerogative. There is something about those piles of dead civilians that doesn't sit right with me. Thanks for joining this deep dive into his story. If you found this journey as fascinating as I did, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more intriguing insights and ring the bell to stay updated. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. History is a conversation. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the untold stories of our past. This is Tales of Twists